Look, I'm not saying humans are completely insane. That would be rude and possibly actionable under galactic law. I'm just saying that if you were to line up all the sapient species in the known universe and ask them to jump into a pit of carnivorous slime molds for funsies, the humans would already be halfway down before you finish the sentence. And they'd probably be laughing about it too, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me introduce you to the greatest clusterfuck in the history of the Galactic Federation's educational exchange program. I'm talking, of course, about the time we accidentally enrolled a group of humans in Extreme Survival Classroom 101. Now, before you ask, yes, that's a real class. No, it's not usually for beginners, and absolutely not. We did not intend for any species classified as Deathworlders to ever set foot in it. But bureaucracy, as they say, finds a way. And by they, I mean me, right now, because I'm still trying to figure out how in the name of the seven suns this happened. It all started when the exchange program decided to expand its curriculum to include more practical courses. You know, the kind of stuff that might actually be useful if you found yourself stranded on a hostile planet with nothing but your wits and a malfunctioning universal translator. The board thought it would be a nice way to promote interspecies understanding and cooperation. What they didn't count on was the human ability to completely misread every single warning label ever created. The course description clearly stated extreme danger, not suitable for class 10 or below terraformed species. Fatality rate, 63%. Galactic Standard Year 3384 results. To most species, this screams stay away unless you have a death wish or are physically incapable of experiencing fear. To humans, apparently, it whispers seductively, sexy, wanna have some fun. And so, on the first day of the new semester, Professor Zilksnax slithered into the classroom, ready to terrify a new batch of advanced students with tales of narrow escapes and gruesome deaths. Instead, he found himself face to face, well, face to knee, given the height difference with 5 grinning humans. Welcome, Zilksnax began, his voice dripping with the kind of dread usually reserved for extinction-level events, to Extreme Survival Classroom 101. I am Professor Zilksnax, and I will be your guide through this harrowing journey of— Wait a minute, he paused, his 17 eyes blinking in rapid succession. Are you, humans? The tallest of the group, a freckled redhead with arms like tree trunks, stepped forward. Sure are, Prof. I'm Jake. These are my buddies Sarah, Rajliu, and Mohammed. We're super stoked to be here. Zilksnax's exoskeleton paled to a sickly chartreuse. There must be some mistake. This class is not for what? Sarah asked, her smile never wavering. For fun-loving adrenaline junkies ready to take on whatever you can throw at us. The professor's mandibles clicked anxiously. For Deathworlders, he finally managed to sputter.
The humans exchanged confused glances. Is that like a metal band or something? Raj asked.
Because if so, Luyu chimed in, dibs on being the lead guitarist. Zilksnax felt a migraine coming on, which was impressive considering his species didn't have a central nervous system. No, you don't understand. This class is designed to push even the hardiest of species to their absolute limits. We simulate extreme environments, deadly predators, and catastrophic natural disasters. It's not for awesome people who love a good challenge, Mohammed suggested helpfully. The professor's exoskeleton was now cycling through colors faster than a malfunctioning disco ball. Listen to me very carefully, he said, enunciating each word as if it might be his last. This class has a fatality rate of 63%. That means more than half of the students who take it actually die. As in, cease to exist. Shuffle off this mortal coil. By the galactic farm, is any of this getting through to you? The humans stared at him for a long moment. Then, as one, they burst into laughter. Oh man, Jake wheezed, wiping a tear from his eye. For a second there, I thought you were serious. I am serious, Zilksnax shrieked, his voice rising to a pitch that would make a dog whistle feel inadequate. Sarah patted him on what she hoped was a shoulder. Don't worry, Prof, we signed all the waivers. We know what we're getting into. Yeah, Raj added. It's not like we haven't done stuff like this before. Remember that time we went spelunking in that radioactive cave system on Epsilon Eridani IV? Or when we accidentally crashed our shuttle into that black hole and had to MacGyver our way out using nothing but a paperclip and Liu's extensive knowledge of theoretical physics, Mohammed reminisced fondly. Liu shrugged modestly. It was just basic 11-dimensional calculus. Anyone could have done it. Zilksnax stared at them, his 17 eyes glazing over slightly. He briefly considered retiring on the spot, faking his own death, or possibly both simultaneously. But no, he was a professional. He had a job to do, even if it meant babysitting a group of certifiably insane primates with more enthusiasm than sense. Fine, he said, resigning himself to what was sure to be the most stressful semester of his 300-year teaching career. Let's begin with something simple. Today's lesson, surviving in a Class 18 acidic swamp environment while being hunted by psychic crocodiles.
The humans cheered as if he'd just announced free ice cream.
And so began the most bizarre, terrifying, and unexpectedly hilarious semester in the history of the Galactic Federation's educational exchange program. The first practical exercise took place in a holographically simulated swamp that made the Amazon look like a kiddie pool. The air was thick with noxious fumes, the ground bubbled ominously, and in the distance, the distinctive roar of something very large and very hungry echoed across the landscape. Your task, Zilksnax announced, hovering safely above the muck in his anti-grav chair, is to navigate through this hostile environment, locate the emergency beacon, and activate it, all while avoiding the native predators and the caustic terrain. You have 6 hours. Good luck, and may whatever deity you believe in have mercy on your souls. With that cheery send-off, he vanished, leaving the 5 humans standing knee-deep in what looked suspiciously like radioactive guacamole. Well, Jake said, grinning from ear to ear, this beats the hell out of that corporate retreat I was supposed to go on this week. Who's ready for some fun? Sarah was already pulling out a device that looked like the bastard child of a Swiss Army knife and a quantum computer. I've got good news and bad news, she announced. The good news is I think I can rig this to detect the beacon's signal. The bad news is it might also attract every predator within a 50-mile radius. How is that bad news? Raj asked, looking genuinely puzzled. Yeah, Lou chimed in. That just means we get to see more of the local wildlife up close and personal. Mohammed, meanwhile, was busy collecting samples of the acidic sludge. Guys, check this out, he said, holding up a vial of violently bubbling liquid. I think this stuff might be the galaxy's most effective exfoliant. We could make a fortune if we market it right. As the group cheerfully debated the merits of weaponizing swamp goo versus selling it as a beauty product, they failed to notice the massive shape rising from the murk behind them. It wasn't until a shadow fell over them that they turned to find themselves face to face with what could only be described as a crocodile's roided-out cousin. The creature was easily the size of a bus, with scales that seemed to shimmer and shift colors like an oil slick. Its eyes glowed with an eerie intelligence, and as it opened its mouth, revealing row upon row of teeth that would make a great white shark feel inadequate, the humans felt a strange pressure in their minds. Oh cool, Jake said, his eyes lighting up. Psychic crocodiles. I've always wanted to try telepathic wrestling. Before anyone could point out the many flaws in that statement, Jake had launched himself at the creature with a war cry that sounded suspiciously like cowabunga. What followed was a scene that would have made professional wrestlers question their career choices. Jake, displaying a combination of insane bravery and what can only be described as dumb luck, managed to get the creature in a headlock. This, of course, led to the surreal sight of a human riding a psychic crocodile like it was a particularly ornery mechanical bull. Yeehaw, Jake hollered as the creature thrashed about, sending waves of acidic sludge in all directions. Someone get a picture. My mom's never going to believe this. Sarah, ever practical, was already snapping photos with a camera that seemed specifically designed for hostile environments. Got it. Also, I think I've figured out how their psychic abilities work. It's actually a form of quantum entanglement between their brain synapses, and she was cut off as a glob of acid flew past her head, missing by inches and dissolving a nearby tree in seconds. Fascinating, Raj said, ducking another spray of corrosive swamp juice. But maybe we should focus on, not dying. Lou, who had been furiously scribbling equations in a waterproof notebook, looked up with a grin. I think I can use the swamp's natural resonance frequency to disrupt the crocodile's psychic field. We just need something to amplify the signal. Mohammed held up his vial of swamp goo triumphantly. Will this work? What followed was a series of events that defied both logic and several laws of physics. Using Sarah's rigged beacon detector, Liu's hastily calculated equations, Mohammed's collected swamp samples, and Raj's surprisingly extensive knowledge of animal psychology, they managed to create a makeshift psychic disruptor. The device, which looked like something cobbled together from spare parts and sheer force of will, emitted a high-pitched whine that made the human's teeth ache. The effect on the psychic crocodile, however, was immediate and hilarious. The creature's eyes crossed, its psychic assault fizzling out like a wet firework. It began to spin in circles, clearly disoriented, before finally flopping onto its back with all the grace of a beached whale. Jake, who had somehow managed to stay on the creature's back throughout this ordeal, dismounted with a flourish. And that, ladies and gentlemen, he announced, taking a bow, is how we do it on Earth. The others applauded, partly out of genuine admiration and partly out of sheer relief at still being alive. Okay, Sarah said, consulting her jury-rigged beacon detector. According to this, the emergency beacon should be about 2 kilometers that way. She pointed towards what appeared to be a particularly nasty-looking section of the swamp, complete with ominous bubbling and the occasional geyser of acid. Race you there, Raj called out, already taking off at a sprint. As the humans charged headlong into danger, laughing and placing bets on who would reach the beacon first, they remained blissfully unaware of their slack-jawed audience. Unbeknownst to the intrepid or insane, depending on your perspective, humans, their every move was being watched by an increasingly bewildered group of alien observers. In a control room far above the simulated swamp, Professor Zilksnax and a panel of expert judges sat in stunned sat, their eyes, all 74 of them, collectively glued to the array of monitors before them. Did that human just wrestle a psychic mega crocodile? One judge, a gelatinous being named Blorp, asked in a voice that suggested they were seriously questioning their life choices. Forget the wrestling, another judge, a avian creature called Creac, squawked. Did you see how they weaponized the swamp itself? That's not supposed to be possible. Professor Zilksnax, who had been uncharacteristically quiet until now, finally spoke up. In all my years of teaching, he said slowly, each word dripping with a mixture of awe and horror, I have never seen anything like this. They're not just surviving. They're thriving. On the screens, the humans could be seen swinging on vines over pools of bubbling acid, using makeshift shields crafted from the mega crocodile's shed scales, and generally treating one of the most hostile environments in the known galaxy like it was some sort of demented amusement park. Should we stop them? Blorp ventured hesitantly. Zilksnax considered this for a moment. No, he said finally. I have a feeling we're witnessing something unprecedented here. Let's see how far they can go. As if on cue, one of the screens lit up with a notification, emergency beacon activated. The control room erupted in a cacophony of shocked exclamations and what might have been a fainting spell from one of the more sensitive judges. Impossible, Creac screeched. They've completed the course in record time, and with 0 casualties. On the main screen, the 5 humans could be seen gathered around the activated beacon, high-fiving each other, and were they taking selfies? I can't believe it. Jake's voice came through the speakers, slightly distorted but unmistakably cheerful. This was even better than that time we accidentally fell into that black hole. Oh, remember how we had to recalibrate the laws of physics to get out? Sarah chimed in, her eyes sparkling with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for children in candy stores. Good times, Rajay agreed, nodding sagely, though I still think this swamp could use a good water park. Really lean into the whole acid splash theme. Liu, who was busy jotting down more equations, looked up with a grin. I bet we could rig up something using the geysers and some of that rubber-like fungus we saw earlier. It'd be like the galaxy's most extreme slip and slide. Mohammed, meanwhile, was carefully packing away vials of various swamp substances. I don't forget the gift shop potential, he added. I'm thinking t-shirts that say I survived the acid swamp and all I got was this lousy third-degree chemical burn. As the humans continued to chat and laugh, completely oblivious to the fact that they had just shattered every record in the history of extreme survival, Classroom 101. The control room remained in a state of shocked silence. Finally, Professor Zilksnax cleared his throat, or whatever passed for a throat in his species. Well, he said, his voice a mixture of resignation and grudging admiration, I suppose we should prepare for the next lesson. You can't be serious, Blorp burbled in disbelief. You're going to continue with the course. Zilksnax's exoskeleton shifted to a color that could only be described as determined, bordering on manic. Of course, he replied. After all, we've only just begun.
And so, as the control room buzzed with a mixture of excitement and dread, plans were made for the next challenge. Little did they know, this was only the beginning of what would become known throughout the galaxy as the semester that changed everything, and possibly broke reality a little bit.
The following weeks were a blur of increasingly absurd scenarios, each designed to push the limits of survival to their breaking point. And each time, the humans not only survived but seemed to treat the whole experience like some sort of extreme intergalactic spring break. Take, for example, the vacuum of space endurance test. Most species considered lasting more than a few seconds in the cold, airless void to be a remarkable achievement. The humans, however, turned it into an impromptu game of zero-gravity tag. Tag Urit. Jake's voice crackled over the comms as he propelled himself through the starry expanse, using a fire extinguisher as an improvised thruster. Sarah, hot on his heels, laughed breathlessly. Oh, you're going down, space cowboy. She executed a perfect backflip, using the momentum to slingshot around a conveniently placed piece of space debris. Meanwhile, Raj had somehow managed to rig up a sort of cosmic zipline using a length of carbon nanotubing and 2 asteroids. Hey guys, check this out, he called out before launching himself across the starfield with a whoop of joy. Liu, ever the scientist, was busy collecting samples of space dust and running impromptu experiments on the effects of zero gravity on various snack foods. Fascinating, he muttered, watching a potato chip explode in slow motion. The structural integrity of junk food in a vacuum is truly remarkable. Mohammed, for his part, had taken it upon himself to reorganize the asteroid field into what he claimed was a more aesthetically pleasing arrangement. He floated serenely among the space rocks, nudging them into position with gentle taps of his suited hands. Back in the control room, Professor Zilksnax and the panel of judges watched in a mixture of horror and awe. They've been out there for 6 hours, Blorp burbled, his gelatinous form quivering with disbelief. 6 hours, in open space. Creac ruffled her feathers nervously. Is this normal behavior for their species? Zilksnax, who had long since given up on maintaining any semblance of professional detachment, simply shrugged his upper appendages. At this point, I'm not sure the word normal applies to humans in any context. Just then, the comms crackled to life again. It was Jake, sounding slightly out of breath but undeniably excited. Hey Prof, this is awesome and all, but we're starting to get a bit peckish. Any chance we could pop back in for a snack break? Maybe grab some of those spicy tentacle chips from the cafeteria? The control room fell silent, all eyes and other sensory organs turning to Zilksnax. The professor's exoskeleton cycled through a range of colors before settling on a resigned shade of mauve. Very well, he sighed. Returned to the airlock. We'll take a brief recess. As the humans cheerfully made their way back to the station, high-fiving and comparing scores from their improvised space games, Zilksnax turned to his fellow judges. I think, he said slowly, we may need to reconsider our entire approach to this course. The reconsideration of the course turned out to be less of a scaling back and more of a frantic ramping up. If normal challenges couldn't faze these humans, then by the 7 suns, they'd create challenges that would. And so began what the students affectionately dubbed the Galactic Gauntlet of Doom, much to the consternation of the course administrators, who had been pushing for the more dignified advanced multispecies survival scenarios. First up was the gravity well escape room. The concept was simple. Escape from a room where the gravity could shift wildly at any moment, potentially crushing you against the ceiling or walls. Most species would approach this with caution, carefully calculating each move. The humans, they turned it into a game of extreme parkour. Gravity shift in 3, 2, 1, Liu called out, his eyes glued to a hastily constructed gravitational wave detector. On cue, the room's gravity flipped, sending everything not bolted down hurtling towards what had previously been the ceiling. But instead of panicking, the humans were ready. Jake launched himself off a wall, ricocheting between surfaces like a human pinball. Sarah used the sudden shift to execute a perfect triple somersault, landing gracefully on what was now the floor. Raj, who had somehow acquired a skateboard the origins of which remain a mystery to this day, was grinding along the edges of the room, defying physics with every turn. Mohammed, ever the opportunist, had set up a makeshift lemonade stand in one corner. Get your gravity-defying refreshments here, he called out, serving drinks that seemed to float in their cups regardless of orientation. The control room, by this point, had given up on maintaining any sort of professional decorum. Bets were being placed, snacks were being shared, and more than one judge had produced a flask of something decidedly stronger than lemonade. I've got 20 credits on the redhead doing a quadruple backflip next, Blorp announced, his gelatinous form rippling with excitement. Kriak, who had started the course as the most skeptical of the judges, was now perched on the edge of her seat, feathers puffed up in anticipation. Make it 30, and I'll take that bet. Zilksnax, for his part, had long since abandoned any pretense of running the course. He sat in his hover chair, one appendage massaging his temples, the other holding a data pad where he was furiously scribbling notes for what would eventually become a best-selling memoir, How I Survived Teaching Humans, a cautionary tale.
Back in the gravity well, the humans had not only solved the escape room, but had repurposed it into what they were calling the universe's first 5-dimensional disco, the fluctuating gravity fields. Combined with Sarah's rigged sound system and Jake's surprisingly impressive DJ skills, had created a dance floor that defied comprehension.
This, Liu shouted over the pulsing beat of what sounded suspiciously like Stayin' Alive remixed with quantum fluctuations, is way better than that time we accidentally created a temporary singularity in my garage. Remember how we had to explain that to your homeowner's insurance? Raj called back, executing a move that involved simultaneously being on the floor, ceiling, and 2 walls. Good times, Sarah agreed, her hair floating around her head in a gravity-defying halo. Though I still think they overreacted. It's not like we destroyed the whole neighborhood, just, briefly merged it with a parallel universe. As the impromptu party raged on, breaking several laws of physics and at least 2 intergalactic noise ordinances, the control room had descended into chaos. Judges were dancing on tables, Blorp had somehow managed to form himself into a disco ball shape, and even Kriak was attempting to do the robot a difficult feat for a being with wings instead of arms. Zilksnax, surveying the scene with a mixture of resignation and amusement, finally threw up his appendages in defeat. You know what he announced to no one in particular. I'm officially retiring after this semester. Let someone else try to keep up with these humans. I'm going to write a book and open a nice, quiet tea shop on some backwater planet where the laws of physics still mean something.
Little did he know, his book would go on to become required reading at every galactic university under the title Humans, the species that broke the curve and possibly reality.
The final challenge of the semester was meant to be the piece de resistance, the ultimate test that would push even these seemingly indestructible humans to their limits. It was called, rather ominously, the Omega Scenario. The setup was deceptively simple. Survive for 24 hours on a planet that was actively trying to kill you. Not just hostile wildlife or harsh weather, mind you. The entire planet, from the aggressive flora to the sentient, carnivorous rocks, had evolved with one purpose: to eliminate any form of life that wasn't native to its ecosystem. As the humans were briefed on the challenge, the control room held its collective breath. Surely this would be the thing that finally gave them pause? Jake's hand shot up. Quick question, Prof, are we allowed to bring snacks? Because let me tell you, nothing works up an appetite like running from sentient, carnivorous rocks. Zilksnacks, who by this point had developed a nervous tick in his left eye stalk, simply waved a weary appendage. Sure, why not? Bring a whole picnic if you want. It's not like anything else has gone according to plan this semester.
And so, armed with an assortment of survival gear, a truly impressive amount of snack foods, and their seemingly boundless enthusiasm, the 5 humans were teleported to the surface of what was affectionately known as Murder Planet. Its official designation was XG 27 billion, but even the most stuffy of bureaucrats had to admit that Murder Planet had a certain ring to it.
The moment they materialized, all hell broke loose. The ground beneath their feet began to undulate, trying to swallow them whole. The air itself seemed to congeal, forming acidic droplets that hissed and spat as they fell. In the distance, a forest of what looked like trees, if trees were made of razor-sharp crystals and had a taste for flesh, began to uproot itself and march towards them. Back in the control room, there was a collective intake of breath. This was it. Surely now the humans would realize the gravity of their situation. Jake looked around, a grin spreading across his face. "Guys," he said, his voice filled with awe, "I think I've found my new favorite vacation spot." The control room erupted in a cacophony of disbelieving exclamations. More than a few expensive monitoring devices were dropped, and Blorp, in his shock, accidentally absorbed 3 nearby chairs into his gelatinous form. What followed was 24 hours of what can only be described as survival taken to ludicrous extremes. The humans didn't just survive, they thrived. They innovated. They redecorated. Sarah, using a combination of advanced exonobiology and what she called good old-fashioned horse sense, managed to communicate with the sentient rocks. By hour 3, she had not only convinced them not to eat the humans, but had also organized the galaxy's first ever rock-human cultural exchange program. "You know," she mused, sitting on a now friendly boulder that was eagerly learning English, "I think we've really bridged the silicon-carbon divide here. Who's up for a mixed doubles tennis tournament later?" Raj, meanwhile, had taken it upon himself to optimize the killer crystal forest, using nothing but a pocket multi-tool, some chewing gum, and what he swore was just basic quantum entanglement theory. He had transformed the deadly grove into what he proudly called the galaxy's most extreme wind chime. The sound it produced was indescribable. Some swore they could hear the music of the spheres. Others claimed it gave them visions of past lives. Blorp insisted it had taught him the secret of cold fusion, though he could never quite remember the details after the sound faded. Lou, ever the scientist, had set up an impromptu lab in the caldera of an active volcano, best place for my experiments. The ambient energy really gives my particles that extra zing. He was in the process of writing what would later become a groundbreaking paper on the culinary applications of hyperaggressive planetary aggressions.
"Try this," he called out, offering a bubbling beaker to Mahomond. "I think I've cracked the code on synthesizing the perfect hot sauce. And when I say hot, I mean it might actually create a localized sun in your mouth."
Mahomond, who had somehow managed to set up a thriving import-export business with the local flora and fauna in less than 12 hours, took a cautious sip. His eyes widened, his face turned an interesting shade of puce, and for a moment the others could have sworn they saw steam coming out of his ears.
"Liu, my friend," he gasped, tears streaming down his face even as he grinned, "we're going to be billionaires."
Jake, for his part, had decided that what Murder Planet really needed was a proper tourist infrastructure. By hour 18, he had mapped out sites for no less than 3 theme parks, a chain of luxury hotels with optional acid rain showers, very exfoliating, and was in the process of negotiating with a group of surprisingly business-savvy carnivorous plants to set up the galaxy's most extreme spa treatment. Think about it, he enthused to a bewildered-looking fern that had, up until recently, been trying to dissolve his face. "We'll call it extreme exfoliation. Come for the danger, stay for the baby soft skin, it'll be a hit." Back in the control room, all pretense of running a survival course had long since been abandoned. The judges were alternating between hysterical laughter and existential crises. Kriak had started a betting pool on which human would be the first to accidentally become ruler of the planet. Blorp was furiously taking notes, muttering something about revolutionizing the tourism industry across the galaxy. Zilksnacks, for his part, had given up entirely. He sat in his hover chair, a dazed expression on his face, occasionally mumbling about retirement and the good old days when students had the decency to at least pretend to be challenged by potentially lethal scenarios. As the 24-hour mark approached, there was a palpable sense of anticipation in the control room. What final surprise did these incredible, terrifying humans have in store? The answer came in the form of a transmission from the planet's surface. It was Jake, looking slightly sunburned but otherwise no worse for wear. "Hey, Prof," he said, grinning into the camera. Quick question. What's the process for applying for planetary development rights? Asking for a friend? Well, actually asking for about 10 million friends. Turns out the locals really like us." Behind him, the others could be seen engaged in what appeared to be a lively game of charades with an assortment of creatures that, by all rights, should have been trying to kill them. Sarah was attempting to mime what looked like 2001, a space odyssey to a group of attentive boulders. Raj was teaching a crystal tree how to do the Macarena. Lou was sharing a meal with a pack of what could only be described as acid-spitting wolf lizards, all of whom were wearing bibs and using something that looked suspiciously like oversized chopsticks. Zilk's Nax stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, with the air of someone who has stared into the abyss and found it wearing a party hat and offering him a cocktail, he began to laugh. It started as a low chuckle and built until he was doubled over, his exoskeleton cycling through colors so rapidly it looked like a malfunctioning disco ball.
You know what he finally managed to gasp out between fits of laughter? Go for it. Apply for those development rights. Turn Murder Planet into the galaxy's hottest vacation destination. Write a guidebook. Heck, franchise it. Because if there's one thing I've learned this semester, it's that nothing, absolutely nothing, is impossible when humans are involved.
And so ended the most bizarre, most successful, and most reality-bending semester in the history of the Galactic Federation's educational exchange program. The humans, of course, passed with flying colors, breaking every record in the book and necessitating the creation of several new categories of achievement. Extreme Survival Classroom 101 was retired shortly after, replaced by a new course, Human Studies. How to survive in a galaxy that includes them, it became the most popular elective across all galactic universities. As for Murder Planet, well, let's just say that if you're ever in the X-27 system, you might want to book a stay at the Extreme Exfoliation Resort and Spa. Just remember to bring your sense of adventure, a strong constitution, and maybe some extra sunscreen. After all, when humans are involved, you never know quite what to expect, but you can be sure it'll be one hell of a ride.